Nobody told them they were going to die. Nobody had to. 12 boys and their coach were sitting on a narrow rock shelf 4 kilometers inside a flooded mountain in northern Thailand, in absolute darkness, with no food, no way out, and water that had been rising for days. The youngest was 11 years old. The oldest among the boys was 16. Their coach was 25. They had been there for 9 days. In those 9 days, the Thai military, international rescue teams, cave diving specialists flown in from 3 continents, and more than 10,000 people on the surface had been searching for them. In those 9 days, not a single one of those people had been able to reach them. The water in the tunnels was too deep, too fast, too dark, too dangerous for anything except the most technically advanced cave divers on the planet. And even for those divers, the passage had been, until that morning, impassable. They had been sitting in the dark for 9 days when the lights appeared. Not rescue, not yet, just lights, just 2 men, appearing at the edge of the water at the far end of the shelf, and a voice, British accented, calm, saying, "How many of you are there?" 13 came the answer. Brilliant, said the voice. What followed was not a rescue operation in any sense that word had previously described. What followed was something that had never been attempted before, that the people who devised it believed might kill some of the children they were trying to save, and that the Thai government kept secret from the families of the boys until it was already over. This is the UNLOST FILES. And this is the true story of the Tham Luang cave incident. The cave of Tham Luang sits inside Doi Nong Non Mountain in Chiang Rai Province, in the far north of Thailand. It is one of the longest cave systems in the country, a network of tunnels and chambers that extends for nearly 10 kilometers into the mountain. Some sections wide enough to walk through comfortably, others narrow enough to require turning sideways to pass. Locals know the cave. Tourists visit it. The area around it is unremarkable in the way that beautiful places become unremarkable when they are familiar. Green hills, rice fields, the kind of landscape that registers as backdrop rather than threat. On June 23, 2018, the 12 members of the Wild Boars youth football team finished their afternoon training session and rode their bicycles to the cave. It was a Saturday. Their coach, Ekapal Chanthawang, 25 years old, known to the boys as Coach Ek, had been with the team for 3 years. The plan was a brief exploration, the kind of casual visit that people who live near a landmark make without ceremony or preparation. They left their bicycles and their shoes at the entrance. They did not take food. They did not take communication equipment. They did not take anything that would be useful if the plan changed. The plan changed within an hour. The monsoon season in northern Thailand arrives in a specific pattern that locals understand and account for. The rains come at predictable times, in predictable volumes, following a rhythm the region has adapted to over centuries. What arrived on the afternoon of June 23rd was not predictable. A storm moved in faster than the seasonal pattern anticipated. Earlier, heavier, more total in its precipitation than the forecast had indicated. Inside Tham Luang, the boys and their coach felt the change before they understood it. The water on the cave floor, which had been ankle-deep in places, began to rise. Not gradually, with the speed that water rises when a catchment area the size of a mountain is receiving rainfall at rate the drainage cannot absorb. They turned back toward the entrance. The tunnel they had walked in through was underwater. They retreated deeper into the mountain. The search began the same evening. Parents arrived at the cave entrance and found the bicycles. They found the shoes. The cave is not a place people enter with the intention of staying. The abandoned equipment communicated the situation immediately. Thai authorities were notified. Local rescue teams entered the cave as far as the water allowed, which was not far. By the following morning, it was clear that reaching the boys by conventional means was not possible. The monsoon had saturated the ground throughout the mountain catchment area. Every tunnel in the Tham Luang system that connected to the surface was admitting water. The level inside the cave was continuing to rise. The boys, wherever they were being pushed further from the entrance by water that had no intention of receding while the rains continued. The Thai military took over coordination of the surface operation. Pumping equipment was brought in to attempt to lower water levels in the accessible sections of the cave. Cave rescue specialists from the Thai Navy SEALs began operations. International assistance was requested. It arrived from places that had not been asked specifically. Individuals and teams who heard about the situation through professional networks and came without waiting to be invited. Cave diving is a small world. The people who are genuinely expert in it number in the hundreds globally, and they communicate with each other. When the nature of Tham Luang became clear, a flooded cave system, a missing group, a rescue that would require penetrating kilometers of submerged tunnel, certain names came up immediately. John Volanthen and Richard Stanton were British cave divers with a combined history of technical rescue operations in flooded cave systems across multiple countries. They arrived in Thailand within days of the disappearance becoming international news. They assessed the cave. They began diving. The conditions inside Tham Luang were not, by the standards of what these men had done before, impossible. They were, by any other standard, nearly so. The water was opaque with suspended sediment. Visibility measured in centimeters rather than meters. The current in the narrower sections was strong enough to require active swimming against it rather than neutral buoyancy. The passage geometry alternated between sections large enough to navigate with tanks on your back and restrictions tight enough to require removing equipment and pushing it through ahead of you. They dove deeper into the cave on multiple days, laying guideline as they went. A thin cord that serves as the only navigational reference in zero visibility water, the difference between knowing which direction leads out and not knowing at all. On July 2nd, 9 days after the boys had entered the cave, Volanthen and Stanton reached a section of tunnel that opened into a rising passage, a slope leading upward from the water into air. They surfaced. They moved their lights across the space. 13 faces looked back at them. The video footage from that moment exists. It has been seen by hundreds of millions of people. The specific quality of it, the night vision green, the boys crowded together on the shelf of rock, the way the light from the divers' torches catches the whites of their eyes, is something that does not lose its impact with familiarity. What the footage does not convey with the same immediacy is the specific nature of the problem that the discovery created. Finding them was not the rescue. Finding them was the confirmation that a rescue was necessary and the beginning of a set of questions that had no good answers. The passage between the boys and the cave entrance was, in its current state, impassable for anyone without elite cave diving training. It was impassable for anyone in a state of panic. It involved sections underwater for extended periods in zero visibility, through restrictions tight enough to be nearly impassable for an adult, which meant nearly impossible for an adult carrying a child. The boys could not dive. Most of them could barely swim. The water level, despite the pumping operation on the surface, was not dropping fast enough. The monsoon was continuing. Meteorological data indicated that a second and larger storm system was moving toward the region. If that system arrived before the rescue was complete, the cave would flood to a level that would submerge the shelf where the boys were sitting. The oxygen level inside the chamber was falling. 13 people breathing in an enclosed space were consuming oxygen, and replacing it with carbon dioxide faster than the cave's natural ventilation could compensate. The readings taken by the divers after the discovery showed oxygen at 15% and falling. Normal atmospheric oxygen is 21%. Below 13%, unconsciousness occurs. Below 10%, death follows. The window for getting 13 people out of Tham Luang alive was not open-ended. It was closing from multiple directions simultaneously, and every option for using it required doing something that had not been done before. The plan that emerged from the meetings between the International Diving Team, Thai Military Command, and medical specialists is one that the people who devised it have since described with a frankness that is only possible after the outcome is known. They were not confident it would work. The core problem was the psychological one. A person who enters a state of panic underwater does not simply create a problem for themselves. They create a problem for whoever is with them. In the narrow, zero-visibility passages of Tham Luang, a panicking child would be unmanageable. The diver attempting to manage them would be at risk. The outcome would likely be fatal for both. The solution came from Richard Harris, an Australian anesthesiologist who was also an experienced cave diver. A combination of qualifications so specific to this situation that his presence in Thailand at that moment registers as something beyond coincidence. Harris proposed sedation, not mild sedation, full anesthesia. Each boy would be administered a combination of ketamine, a dissociative anesthetic, alprazolam, and atropine. The dosing would be calculated to render them fully unconscious for the duration of the transit through the flooded sections of the cave. They would be carried through the cave as cargo, masked, buoyant, their hands secured behind their backs to prevent involuntary movement, their unconscious weight managed by a diver in front and a diver behind. The risks were explicit and acknowledged. Anesthesia in a clinical setting requires monitoring, reversal agents, controlled atmosphere, and the immediate capacity to intervene if something goes wrong. None of those conditions existed inside Tham Luang. If a child's airway became compromised under the water, there was no intervention available. If the dosing was wrong, too little and the child regained consciousness in the tunnel. Too much and the sedative suppressed respiration, the outcome was the same. Harris agreed to administer the drugs. He has said subsequently that he believed there was a real possibility that some of the children would not survive the transit. That the decision was made because the alternative, doing nothing and waiting, was a certainty rather than a possibility. The Thai government agreed to the plan. The families of the boys were not informed of the sedation until after the rescue was complete. Between July 8th and July 10th, in 3 separate operations, the 13 members of the Wild Boars football team were brought out of Tham Luang. The logistics of each extraction were exact in a way that left no margin. Each boy was anesthetized on the shelf, fitted with a full-face oxygen mask, and handed to the first diver in a relay chain that extended the full 4 kilometers to the entrance. At each restriction, each flooded section, each change in passage geometry, the unconscious child was passed from diver to diver, managed, controlled, moved. The divers could not see each other in the water. They could feel the guideline. They could feel the weight of the child they were managing. They moved by touch and training through passages that had taken them days to learn well enough to navigate with their eyes open. Each transit took approximately 3 hours. 13 transits over 3 days. The first group came out and the medical teams on the surface found them breathing, sedated, intact. Then the second group. Then the third. On July 10th, Coach Ek, who had insisted on being the last to leave, who had spent the 18 days since the entrapment rationing what little food the group had, meditating with the boys to conserve oxygen and manage fear, drawing on a background that included time as a Buddhist monk to hold 13 people together in a dark cave while the world looked for them, came through the last passage and surfaced. All 13 were out. The only death in the rescue operation was Saman Kunin. He was 38 years old, a retired Thai Navy SEAL who had volunteered for the operation, who had shown up because the situation required people with his skills and because he was the kind of person who shows up when that is true. His role in the operation was the positioning of oxygen tanks along the transit route, the supply chain that made the extended dives possible. On July 6th, during a dive to place tanks, Kunin lost consciousness. His diving partner attempted resuscitation. It was not successful. The oxygen supply he had been positioning kept the boys alive. His name is on a memorial at the cave entrance. Richard Harris has given several interviews in the years since Tham Luang. In one of them, he was asked what he thought as he administered the first dose of ketamine to the first boy, the moment when the plan moved from concept to action, when the decision became irreversible. He said he thought, "I hope this works. Not a calculation, not a clinical assessment. The specific, honest, human hope of a person doing something they have never done before, in conditions they were never trained for reasons that required no explanation." It worked. 13 boys entered that cave on a Saturday afternoon in June with their bicycles parked outside and their shoes left at the entrance, and no reason to believe that the next 18 days would be anything other than ordinary. What those 18 days produced, the specific, strange, unprecedented chain of events that brought every one of them out, does not fit any template that existed before it happened. It required divers who had spent decades developing skills for exactly this kind of situation. It required a doctor willing to anesthetize children in a cave and carry the weight of what that decision meant. It required a retired soldier who went back into the water one more time. It required a 25-year-old coach who understood, in the dark and the silence and the falling oxygen, that the most important thing he could do for 12 boys was to keep them calm enough to wait. It required all of it simultaneously, without any single piece being available to substitute for any other. And it worked. This has been the UNLOST Files. Saman Kunin did not come home from Tham Luang. His name belongs in this story as much as any other name does. Subscribe if you want more. Leave a comment with what stayed with you, because with this one, everyone stops somewhere different. I'll see you in the next one.